It. Hey, how you doing, everyone? I just was singing Depeche Mode, and I realized Miller Thomas had hit record. We don't have the rights to do Depeche Mode, no, but we do have the right to talk about Major League Baseball. This is yet another crossover with Locked On Diamondbacks and Locked On MLB. Buckle up, Buttercups. Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, Locked On Diamondbacks crossover. This is once a week we get together. Miller Thomas and I get together to talk about the world of baseball exclusively through the lens of the Arizona Diamondbacks fan and through the lens of all 29 other franchises. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. If you don't believe me, check out my lower third. It says Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been podcasting for over a decade about baseball, and now for 5 years here as a member of the Locked On Podcast Network. And once a week, this Baja Kaloop over here is my co-host. Baja Kaloop, why don't you please tell people who you are?
Yeah, Miller Thomas, host of Locked On Diamondbacks. We had to push it back a little bit, our normally scheduled times, because of conflict of interest between our schedules. But we're here now. You can follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for the personal account, of course, or just look up Locked On Diamondbacks, Twitter, Instagram for the show handle. And of course, please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel.
I had a complaint, by the way, Miller Thomas, that someone was saying that when you were on, it was obviously was a Dodger fan, that you were on, that you were biased against the Dodgers. And I said, well, he's the host of Locked On Diamondbacks. What do you expect him to be doing? To be jumping up and down saying, I bleed Dodger blue? I got to make something clear here. I am the host of Locked On MLB. I'm a native New Englander. I have made no bones about the fact that I've grown up a huge Red Sox fan, and I am not going to pretend that I don't have rooting interests. Miller Thomas is the host of freaking Locked On Diamondbacks, not Locked On I Love the Dodgers. All right?
Yeah, sorry. I wanted the team that wins the division every year to lose in the first round of the playoffs. I apologize for that.
But also keep in mind something here, and this is something I'm always trying to stress with my show, and I think you come across as well. While we may have our personal rooting interests, I don't think that's going to affect any discussion of reality. You know, you're not going to come on and say the Dodgers stink. You're not going to say that I'm not going to come on and say that the Red Sox are on pace to win 112 games and sweep the World Series. We're going to deal in reality. You know, just because you have biases doesn't mean you cannot discuss things in terms of reality, in terms of having a point of view of it. I will praise the Yankees and I will trash the Red Sox when need be. And if you don't believe me, you're going to love today's episode. But we're going to be talking a little bit about the disaster that continues for the Red Sox this offseason. The Marlins and the Dodgers made a couple of interesting moves that I think have some long-term ramifications. And I talked with Brian Finkelstein in yesterday's episode about the Mets implication with the being in and out of the Carlos Correa signing. But Miller and I are going to be talking about it in general, what this means, and his signing with Minnesota, and what it means for the division and what it means for the Mets, Phillies, and Braves, the three main teams in the National League East. So how you doing, Miller? What's up with you?
You know, I'm doing good, Sully. Just soaking in this offseason day by day. We've been waiting for this Carlos Correa fiasco saga to end. I thought at least maybe he was going to stay with the Mets because Stephen Cohen, I felt like he's a guy. Yeah, there's some risk and some injury with Carlos Correa, but I thought they would have just restructured that contract, make it more incentive-based because a guy like Stephen Cohen is not going to let a player of Carlos Correa's caliber just walk out the building and we can add him to the lineup and still be, I'm guessing, elite for the next few years. I don't think his knee's just going to – I haven't seen the physical, but I'm assuming his knee's not going to just give up and give out on him over the next couple seasons.
Well, I actually happen to have his physical right here. I have it. I'm just going to take a look. And why they didn't ask me, it turns out he's sick.
What's the issue with him? What's the prognosis?
He's hurt. But I made the point, you and I talked about this, that one thing we learned from the signings of Bryce Harper and the signings of Manny Machado is when you have a chance to sign a potential Hall of Fame talent still in their prime, you do it. And the great thing, if you're a Met fan, Steve Cohen's doing what you want every owner to do, which is I'm sitting on, to paraphrase Jackie Cation, a Scrooge McDuck pile of money, and I'm going to have fun signing players and doing all the things that you want to. I've had generations of Met fans complaining that the Mets don't go all in on this and don't go all in on that. Well, now they went all in, and they're doing what every fan base would want to see their owners do. And I'm sure he thought, I mean, it may have been a little bit of overkill whether or not to bring in Correa, but it was like, okay, fine, now we're doing it. We're bringing him in. He's going back to Minnesota, which it's funny. I predicted he was going to go to Baltimore. I thought Baltimore was a great landing spot for him, especially for a team that had a surprise winning season after all those years of irrelevance. They're completely irrelevant every year since Juan Encarnacion hit that home run off of Ubaldo Jimenez while what's his doodle? Zach Britton was reading Bazooka Joe bubblegum cards in the bullpen not being used. Well, the Orioles have finally become relevant again, and I thought this was the off season, especially with their bargain basement payroll, to say, hey, we had a winning season last year, but there's a little bit of anger from the fan base because they traded away Lopez and they traded away Mancini at the trade deadline instead of adding. So why don't we sign a big-time free agent to tell our fans, no. Winning time has begun here. And I thought, because they also have a giant hole at shortstop, I thought Correa would be perfect. And every time he kept going back into free agency, first with San Francisco, first when he began free agency, then the Giants deal fell through, the Mets deal fell through. I kept thinking, Orioles, come out and play, as I make yet another completely dated reference. And alas, he went back to the Twins, and I found that to be surprising, but he apparently fit in very well with Minnesota, so I guess it worked out well for all parties.
Yeah, a lot of charades just for Carlos Correa to end up back on the same team, which was the Minnesota Twins. And I don't really know what that does for the Twins going forward. Like, I don't look at them as like a more dangerous team, at least in the short term. But I think long term, this helps the Twins a lot because it just adds a level of credibility when you have a player of Carlos Correa's caliber now in your lineup every day, locked in for 6 years. I think it's going to be a little bit easier now for the Twins to maybe attract free agents. Maybe they get a little bit more aggressive on the trade market, because now you're like, I got this building block. I got this foundational piece for the near future. He's in his prime. We know the physicals aren't great on Carlos Correa. So now it's like, if you're the Twins, you kind of have to go all in over the next, 3 to 4 years to really build a contender with the Correas and, I don't know, the Byron Buxtons of the world, because this Minnesota Twins team, like, we don't know the physicals of Correa. We've seen Byron Buxton the last few years on and off the field with injuries. Like, this Twins team in the lineup has talent, but also has a lot of combustible pieces when you look at it from a health standpoint of the Buxtons and Correas. And I still look at that rotation of the Twins. I'm not in love with it. I like Joe Ryan from last year, but when you have a rotation led by Dylan Bundys and the Chris Archers of the world, I'm just not going to take you that serious. So I think the window has opened up a little bit for the Twins to get aggressive now that they have Carlos Correa in the building, but they have to be careful because a lot of their main stars in that lineup are very injury prone, which can cause some risks down the line.
Here's some of the things to be positive if you're a Minnesota Twin fan. First and foremost, remember this team, yes, they had a disastrous final couple of months, but they were in first place by themselves for a gigantic chunk of it last year. Going into August, they were in first place by themselves for most of the year. And they wound up tying Cleveland with about the day before Labor Day. They were tied for first place. They were tied for first place in September. And so what happened was the Guardians beat the tar out of them every time they played each other, and they had a bad final 3 weeks. If they had a good 3 weeks, they would have won the division. All right. Also, this is the best thing that is going in their favor is the fact that they play in the American League Central. Yes,
Yeah.
Cleveland had a very good team last year, a very young team, and that could and that played a little bit over their heads with a bargain basement payroll. I think Cleveland looks like a very good team, but remember going into last year, everybody and their cow were picking the White Sox, and so if you go in
Yeah.
every year, everyone and their cow is going to pick Cleveland this year. The White Sox looked like they were poised to win the division for the next 2 or 3 years in a row. Now it helped the fact that the late Tony La Russa was managing the team and not doing a very good job of it. They finished the season at a break-even 500. But as I said, this Twins team was a month away from winning a division. And they were very good in the truncated 2020 season. They were good in the night. They've been having playoff teams recently. I do think there's talent on this team, and it's a very winnable division. 89 wins could probably win the division.
Yeah,
And if
that's what
you have a player like Correa at the heart of this, I do think that they're going to do well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest selling points of bringing Correa back is the fact that this division is so wide open. There's no Houston Astros in this division. There's no Yankees. This is not the NL West. This is not the NL East. Like, you pretty much look at every division in baseball. They got 2 or 3 teams where you're like, okay, if they win the World Series at the end of the year, I'm not going to be surprised. But the AL Central might be the only division in baseball where if any of those teams win the World Series this next coming season, I probably will be a little bit shocked. And on this podcast, we always talk about big market versus small market, right? The Minnesota Twins just proved once again, if you are willing to pay the bag to someone, you can get a franchise star in the building. There's no such thing as small market teams. Baseball players just care about money. Look at Carlos Correa's saga. He went to the Giants because they were going to give him the most money over the long haul. He didn't pass that physical. He went to the Mets. They were the next team offer him the bag. He didn't pass that physical. So now he's back in Minnesota because Minnesota was like, you know what? We can't give you 10 to 12 years, Carlos Correa. We can't incur that kind of risk, but we will overpay you for just 6 years, the best years of your prime. And guess what? If Carlos Correa's knee is still holding up 6 years from now, he can get paid again. This is what I want baseball players to do. Sign these short-term deals where you get overpaid like the Max Scherzer of the world. Just sign a 4-year deal where you get $35 million a year. And then you could do that 3 or 4 more, well, maybe not 4 more times, but you could do that maybe 2 or 3 more times if you're entering your free agency late in your 20s. So I want baseball players to take a model from the NBA. Do what LeBron's doing. Do these short-term deals where you get a fat contract for the short term, then you could keep re-upping over and over again and make more money in your career over the long haul. I know baseball players love that long-term security, but once again, you're playing baseball. It's one of the safest sports you could play out there.
Well, and also I think the notion that Minneapolis is a small market is ridiculous. I mean, just in terms of the size of the city, it's gigantic. The amount of corporate money and everything like that in Minnesota is huge. I think it's crazy.